Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I may not be a familiar face, or I am a familiar face, but not as a substitute host. So, joining me today is an author, a contributing writer. Also, she's the EIC of Phoenix Fitness Fanatics, and we're here
Yes.
today to talk about authorship. And two questions always come up. The first is, do I have what it takes to be an author? Can I really write and can I really publish a book or get a book published? And then the second following question always is, how do I know that there's an audience for my book? How do I know that? If I write it, am I going to have an audience or is my book going to be out there floating around someplace and I have no audience? So, those are the two questions that come up, and those are the two questions that we're going to talk about today. And both Tiffany and I are both authors. And I will let Tiffany start with the first question.
Well, thank you so much, Teresa, for look being host today, and for everyone for joining us this morning on the Author's Corner. So, do I have what it takes to be an author? Everyone has what it takes to be an author. Everyone has a story because guess what? Life is a story. Life is a story. I mean, any experience that you have been through in life is a story. Any struggle that you've been through in life is a story. And sometimes your story is not your story. Sometimes something that someone else needs to hear. It's a story that they need to hear so they understand that they're not alone because we deal with so many similar things. We're all different, but we're all the same in so many ways. So, when I read a story about someone, struggling with something that maybe I'm going through, it gives me faith and hope that, you know what, wow, they got through that. I know I can get through that too. So, do you have a story, and do you have what it takes to be an author? Yes, everyone out there has what it takes to be an author.
I totally agree. We all have that story inside of us that really wants to come out, and we all have a message to share with others, share with the world. And through writing and by being an author is how it comes out. So, do you have what it takes to be an author? Absolutely, because all it takes is your passion, your idea, your experience, maybe your travels, anything like that. That's all it takes. So start writing it down. That's the first thing that I would tell people is that when you go to write a book, you don't start with chapter one, chapter two, and so on. What you first do is you write down ideas.
Yeah.
You write down almost like a journal, but this is more like a living journal because what you're going to do is write things down as they come into your head. You're not going to
Mhm.
think about it. So you're just going to start writing. What kind of ideas do I have? What am I interested in? And just write. Take about 5 minutes. If that's too long for some people, then cut it down to 2 minutes, two and a
Yeah.
half minutes. But start writing down your ideas. They don't even have to make sense
No.
because what you're doing is you're laying the groundwork for your book. So before you could have an outline, before you could have chapters, you have to have this idea, this passion. What do you want to write about? Don't worry about if anybody's interested or not interested, and we'll get to that second question in a minute, but write down everything. Just let it flow. And
Yeah.
then what you do is you put that journal, those writings aside, and you don't come back to them until the next day. And the next day, you look at what you wrote. Hmm, is there something more that I could be writing? Do I want to elaborate on one of those thoughts? And again, you go through the process. And I would do this for a week to
Yeah.
really set the stage, to get those juices flowing. And again, doesn't matter if it makes any sense or not. what you're doing is you're laying that foundation to
Yes.
begin to write that book. What are your thoughts about that, Tiffany?
I completely agree with you on the journaling. And honestly, I feel that, I like to journal daily. I like to, as a health and fitness coach, I keep two journals, and I have my clients keep two journals, food journal, and then just your thoughts of the day. Just being able to write down everything that you're thinking, all the things that maybe happened that day, even your feelings, everything. Just dump it out. And like you said, it doesn't have to make sense, and then you come back to it. And when you come back to it and you read through, the things that, like, I'll put it aside for a week. And, I have funny stories that will happen, just through life, right? Because I wrote it down, and I actually had my last book, Unsnapped, that came from reading back in journals and things from years ago to see something that had made me want to snap, you know, and that's how that idea was actually birthed, was through my journaling from just years. So I say, really, just write out your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, all those things, your ideas, because it's also very therapeutic. We hold things in. I know for myself, I would internalize things so much, and it got me to a point where I actually got sick. I actually
Mm.
had, a kind of a breakdown because I was
Oh,
internalizing things and I wasn't getting it out. So the first thing that I was actually told to try to get over this and overcome that situation was to write out my feelings and my emotions, and just write out your day. Write out, how you were feeling during the day. Write out, if you met someone, how that person made you feel, whatever that is. And again, that's very therapeutic, and really it helps to just get those creative juices flowing, and also helps you to just get it out, empty all the nastiness, just push it out, right?
yeah, yeah,
No anxiety, right? What's that song? No anxiety. So yeah, push that out. It doesn't even, and let it go out with the words, right? So yeah, I definitely agree with the journaling. And yeah, everyone does definitely have a story, and you need to share.
yeah, definitely. And then the second question comes up. Okay, now you have an idea, you know what you're passionate about, and you think to yourself, I want to write about X or Y or Z, but is there a market for that? What is the publisher going to think if I submit this? Are they going to like it? And I say this because when I first started writing a book back in 2020, I was dead set and I knew what my passion was. Of course, it was about the heart. I'm a nurse
Hmm.
practitioner, holistic cardiology. I bridge Eastern and Western medicine. So I utilize both the ancient wisdom of the heart, spiritual practices, along with traditional medical cardiac care. And I was so intent that I wanted an audience that I first sat down and wrote for a publisher. Okay, I picked a couple publishers and I thought, okay, this is what they would like. Well, that was a disaster because
Mm.
I originally did publish the book. I published it through Balboa Press, and they
Hmm.
helped me change it around some. But what was being told to me was that I had to put more of myself in the book. So the book barely
Yeah.
got on the market where I had to turn around and say, this isn't me. And it really wasn't me because I was trying to write as an educator, as a professional. And it was also during the time of COVID. And that
Hmm.
was why the publisher pushed my book through. They pushed it through. Balboa Press pushed it through because they thought it was important. And what they said to me was, let's publish your book. Let's get it out there so people get the information to help take care of themselves. And then we could go back and we could revise this book. So the
Hmm.
first book that went out was called, oh God, what was it? Finding Sanctuary in the Pandemic Age. And God, what a title. But at the time it fit. So it went out on the market. And then within like 7, 8 months, once things started to settle down in 2020, Balboa Press came back to me and said, okay, let's make this a little bit more about, about how you want this written. What
Hmm.
do you really want from this book? And that took some time. So then Heal Your Heart from Within came out. Um, and it was really a process, but I worry too much about an audience when I start it, and that's not what you should do. What you should really do is write with your heart, write from your heart. What are you passionate about? What are these ideas? What do you want the world to know?
Right.
You know, whether or not they want to hear that at the time, that's not important. What's important is you write from your heart, and then you could always go back if you need to change things, or if you feel maybe something's a little bit too personal, you could go back and change it. So I say
Yes.
go with your ideas, write from your heart. Don't worry about what a publisher thinks, because
Absolutely.
once your book is written, to get it edited, you could always even get a book coach. You could submit book proposals for the book. And at that
Hmm.
point, then you get a better idea of what needs to be changed, but always know that you still have to write from your heart. You're not writing from the publisher's heart, from the publisher's brain. You're not writing per se for that audience. You're writing to give your message. So
Right.
what are your thoughts
Yeah.
on that, Tiffany?
You're spot on with that, Teresa. Definitely. And see, I started out with anthologies. I was asked by my business coach. I was in a group coaching program, and she said, "You know what? We're going to write a book." And I said, "Wait, we're going to write a book?" It's called The Queen Boss Rise. And I said, "Well, what am I going to write about?" And she says, "Well, you're going to write about your journey. Your journey from your transition from corporate to entrepreneur in an area that you were very passionate about, which is health and wellness." I'm like, okay, well, who's gonna want to hear? Who's gonna want to read that? But she says, what do you mean? Who's gonna want to read that? She says, you need to go back and just look at your story. Look at how you got to this point. People are going to have questions about how you released, over 100 pounds. They're going to ask, how did you change your mindset and be able to, get all that toxic out of your life, the toxic relationships, the toxic jobs, how did you manifest your perfect partner, all those things. Because you think that
Yeah.
people aren't going to want to hear that. They want to hear that. And as you're sharing your story, they're going to have questions. So you're going to have to be ready to write yourself your own memoir at some point, because yes, these are, when you're writing, as like you said, you're writing from your heart, you're sharing your story. And again, your story is not your story. It is something that's going to educate someone to be able to get to somewhere that you are already. Some people are there. We don't know who's watching us out there. And by sharing our stories, we are able to really help to educate people on how we are able to overcome these challenges in life and be able to get to where we want to in life, right? I mean, we're not all perfect,
Right.
but we are, I mean, I never thought I'd be an entrepreneur out there making my own hours, being able to, go to different places, building, international, property, things like that. And a lot of it is because I have been sharing my story out there. Again, I started with the anthologies. Then I decided I wanted to write my own anthologies with other women that were sharing stories from trauma to triumph. And I did that at the time. It was kind of right after COVID, where people were
Mhm.
really like, like, what do we do? What do we do? Everything's opening up again. And, there was a lot of trauma going on,
Mhm.
and I felt like, let's get some stories, some trauma to triumph stories. Let's share those stories and give people that faith. that these women have gone through. You've got cancer survivors, you've
Mm,
got, women that were, there was a woman that was assaulted on a New York train and
mm,
trampled, but now it's that she was in a wheelchair for years, and now, has rebuilt it and rebuilding, her company, and she's walking, and, just being able to share those types of stories, that there's going to be an audience. There's a lot of
mm,
people out there dealing with trauma, with
yeah.
Unsnapped. When I thought about Unsnapped, I went back and I love watching that show Snapped because I
Uh,
watch it and I go, oh my gosh, like how could these people do what they do? But it kind of made me laugh because sometimes I'd be watching, I'd be like, man, I know through the years I've been through some stuff and I could have possibly went there, but I didn't, and I said, there's probably a lot of people out there that want to understand like how to not snap. When you
right.
look at what's going on right now in the media and just different, and all around the world, you've got people snapping and there's just disastrous stuff going on around us. So I knew that there was going to be an audience that wants to learn how to stay unsnapped. So when you are thinking about what to write, just write from your heart and let the right people chime in because you're going to have an audience. This world is so big. So just share and let your tribe come because they will come.
Yeah. Find your tribe. And writing too is therapeutic. So even if you don't plan to publish a book, you could still write a book. You could write it for you as your own therapy. And you could write whatever you want in that. And then maybe years later, you may decide that that is a book. And I do know somebody that had used a book for her own. She was, some things had happened and she was going through some different changes and she wrote it all down. And what she did was, as she wrote it, she revised and then wrote chapters. Like chapter one was some part of her life, chapter two, chapter three, say. And she did that. And she kept everything for about 20 years. And I'm part of the Hay House authors community, and she's one of the authors in that community. Well, 20 years after she wrote her book for herself, she edited it. She did all these things to get it ready to publish, but never published it because she never wanted to at the time. 20 years later, she published a book.
Mm,
So, how phenomenal is that?
wow.
That she wrote something totally for
Right?
herself to help herself get through something, did it as a book because she was creative and wanted to do that, but said, I never wanted to publish it because it was private. It was for me, it was my therapy. And now that book can help others. And it is helping others because you
Yeah,
never know, like you
absolutely.
said, you never know how your story is going to help somebody else. You just don't know that. Anything
Right.
that you write can help people. I've had people tell me, oh, this part that, my book isn't about me. My book is really about self care, self empowerment. And I have people that will say to me, oh, when I read that part in your book, I just knew that that was what was going to empower me. I knew that that was my missing piece of why I wasn't able to take care of myself properly. So you don't know. You never know what kind of impact you're going to have on people. I had somebody tell me, somebody I went to school with many years ago, that contacted me on Messenger after the book came out and said, the book is helping me. I have cancer and it's helping me with
Oh,
my cancer treatment. It's a book about self care. It's a book about
mhm.
connecting to your heart. She was using it for her being able to get through cancer. And now years later, about 5 years later, I guess, she's cancer free. And what
Oh,
it was just a beautiful story. But I can't say enough. We don't know how what we do, what we write, what's in our hearts, how that's going to affect someone else. So I'm going to close
so
this out and
true.
I'll give you a chance to say a final word. And my final word for anybody would be go for it. You have a story to tell. Do not be afraid. Just put those ideas on paper and see where it goes. Tiffany, what would you like to share with us?
Right. Oh, just start. Just start. If you're sitting there and you're like that double dutch game, like, should I get in there, should I, oh, just start, because there is someone out there that needs to hear your story, because they need that faith, they need that hope, that they can also overcome and rise just like you have. So definitely just start. And if you need some help, let us know, because there's a lot of people in the Own It magazine and publishing platform that can help you with editing, publishing, getting your book out there. You want to be a number 1 bestseller, we can help you with that as well. So yeah, just start and just get it out there.
Yeah, just go for it. Like Nike says, just do
Right.
it. And with that, I'll close this. Thank you, everyone, for
Thank you so
joining us,
much.
whether you're live watching the replay. And thank you, all the subscribers to Own It Magazine and
Thank you.
Phoenix
Fanatic.
Fitness Fanatics. I can never say it right. Thank you for that, for everybody. And have a good day,
Have a good day,
evening,
everyone.
wherever you are.